Friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Aireonna. This is Tom Jensen. I just almost forgot my name. I hope you guys are having a great Tuesday. Lots of football stuff going on, and kind of, I don't know, breaking news, but interesting news coming out of Jaguars land that could have a giant effect on the 49ers and could honestly save the 49ers ass. So I guess we'll just jump right into it today, Tom. Do you want to tell the people
Sure.
what news is coming out?
There's rumors today coming out of Jacksonville that the Jags are preparing to make an offer to Liam Cohen. He's the offensive coordinator for Tampa Bay, and a lot of the thinking this week in Jacksonville was we need to get an offensive coordinator because this team isn't going anywhere until they develop Trevor Lawrence. So that was the consensus in Jacksonville. The pushback was that their owner, Shad Khan, is really close with Robert Saleh. They're friends. And
Yeah.
so if the owner was going to make the hire, Saleh had a good shot at it. If the team makes the hire on football reasons, then they hire Cohen. And apparently they're going to hire Cohen. He goes in there tomorrow for a live interview, and they're expected to make an offer to him. If they don't, then on Thursday they meet with Patrick Graham, the DC for the Raiders, and on Friday they meet with Saleh. But based on the reporting today, it sounds like Cohen's going to get the offer from the Jags tomorrow.
And that kind of makes sense. I mean, Baker Mayfield had a career resurgence
Yeah,
in Tampa, and that's what they're hoping for in Jacksonville, right? Like they've hitched their wagon to Trevor Lawrence. They've let go of multiple coaches. I know Trent Baalke's still there, but I think in order for the Jaguars to see any success within the next 5 years, they need Trevor Lawrence to work out. And they also just extended him. I know his contract is something they could get, out of in a few years if they needed to. But yeah, you need to bring a guy in. And it's interesting to know that a deciding factor might be getting an OC to work with Trevor Lawrence, because I've kind of wondered that obviously in New York with the Jets, Saleh had a great defense, but the problem there was the offense and was developing the quarterback. And maybe that quarterback wasn't, didn't have the same amount of talent and stuff. So I'm not putting that all on him. Like some picks are just bad picks. But when you're choosing a defensive coordinator to be the head coach, it's so important who they're going to get as the OC. And I feel like with Jacksonville, who's kind of in a we need results now. Trent Baalke, if he's going to be there, need results now, or I'm going to get let go in a year. I think the best option is to go with an offensive guy. I feel bad because I feel like I'm biased towards that, and I know it can be done. Like you look at D'Amico, and the Texans and stuff are doing great. Tomlin, but I feel like you're so reliant on your offensive coordinators. Think about Detroit. I For a lot of these teams, I'm like, oh, there's promise coming in. If I'm Detroit, I'm like, our team might crumble now because we just lost our guy that was, propping up Jared Goff. He was creatively calling play calls for our running backs, and we still have this talent. And I think Dan Campbell's a good coach, but it's really scary when you see success with an offensive guy, and then in a year or two he could leave. I mean, Ben Johnson could have left 2 years ago. He just chose not to. So yeah, if I'm the Jaguars, I can see them leaning towards the offensive coordinator to be their guy. Um, that would be really good for the 49ers as well, because it feels like they've put zero effort into any other basket except for Robert Saleh. And it would definitely take the wind out of those sails. Would they even still go through? No, the interviews would be canceled if they hire him tomorrow.
yeah. Well, they've already gone through the first round of interviews, so they've
Yeah.
satisfied the Rooney Rule. So it's
Okay.
just a question of who they want to hire.
It'll be interesting. I wonder what Liam Cohen, like if they are offering him the job. I wonder. I mean, he accepted the interview, so you think he's at least interested in the head coaching job? Is it going to be something where he's like, Trent Baalke has to go, I want to bring in my own guy? Or is he being sought after from other teams? It'll be interesting, like, what would be a situation where maybe he turns down that job? I don't think you do.
I don't think he would. He isn't interviewing with anyone else. And if he's based in Tampa, it would be a much easier move for his family to go to Jacksonville. So
Yeah. I
I
completely
would
agree.
think that that's the choice for him. And apparently, he had a very good initial interview. So I think that he was already expecting that he was going to get a good shot at getting the job.
Okay. Well, that's like I said, great for the 49ers because Tom, I've been so I guess upset, disappointed. It feels like the urgency has been not been there for the 49ers. Just yesterday, three coaches that I thought should have at least came in for interviews with the 49ers when it came to defensive coordinators and special teams, neither of which, by the way, all three guys who got they ended up getting uh jobs elsewhere. They all didn't even come in for an interview with the 49ers. Like the 49ers are showing zero umph to do their due diligence. Why are they not interviewing? They've interviewed Robert Saleh, Jeff Ulbrich, and Deshaun Townsend, if I'm saying that right.
No, they didn't
Um,
even know. They didn't even interview Ulbrich. They interviewed Staley. Those are the only three that they've interviewed. So, we got to wrap our head around that. The Niners aren't good at plan B. They never have been because organizationally, they have a culture of wishing things into being. And that's how they ended up by saying, okay, we're going to get Spagnuolo. No. We're going to get Belichick. No. And then what happens? They end up saying, well, we have no plan B, so we're going to hire Sorensen from within. And I
yeah,
think this year it's the same thing. It's wishing Salah into being. And if that doesn't happen, then we'll hire Staley. Fortunately, it looks like they're going to luck out and Salah's going to come here. And they
it's
are very, very fortunate.
yeah,
Because if
it's a
that didn't
team I
happen and they hire Staley, good luck.
yeah, it's a team I root for, so I like want it to work out. But then also there's this like part of me that I feel like wants justice, and so I want it to not work out for Salah because I'm like, you need to learn that this is like not an appropriate way of addressing your team's needs. Because like if you keep getting away with it, they're gonna be like, we don't see a problem, and I'm like, no, like this is bad process, and
Yeah, it's really bad process.
it's
But
horrible
again,
process.
it's you can look throughout a number of factors of wishing things into being.
Yeah.
We really won the Super Bowl even though we lost. We
Yeah, you're right.
we can
Thinking about
hit
it that way,
right. We
it's
can
it's
hit the
not their
gas.
first, rodeo with this type of thinking.
Yeah, this thinking runs throughout the entire organization. We don't need to
Oh,
worry
I like
about developing younger players. We can just wait for CMC or Dre to save us. A lot of wishing things into being. Yeah, Mr. Corey, we're going to sit and wait for Rosengarten to fall to us.
yeah,
And then he goes to Baltimore, and now he's on the all rookie team.
yeah,
Hello? And you look at that, and the mocks prior to that draft had, I saw three mocks that has Rosengarten going to Baltimore. That could not have been something that surprised them. And yet Rosengarten's picked right ahead of them, and then they trade out of that pick, which is a sure sign in the draft that the guy you wanted just got taken.
yeah,
But they got lucky because they ended up with Renardo Green. So it worked out in the end, but they lost Rosengarten. And now it looks like Rosengarten's a really good player.
yeah. I one, you need to interview guys because you need to make sure you're bringing in the best guy for your team. Two, you can gain. I think it's Bill Belichick. There's like rumors. I might have seen this in like an old documentary because they've done so many on the Patriots, where Belichick would bring coaches in for interviews solely to get information. Like he'd be like, okay, how would you defend this? How would you attack that? Like he'd be asking them questions, and part of it is, yeah, we're doing our due diligence by conducting, interviewing as many people as possible, but the other part is I could gain critical information here. Maybe you look at, my scheme differently than I do. Maybe you have ideas for players that I don't have, and this is like a time where we can share information. um so
Well, it's
not
smart
only
of Belichick to do that. It's just info
yeah,
gathering.
so not
It's
only is it like
shrewd, but it works.
horrible for the 49ers because I mean, hope to God that it works out with Staley, or
Or it
with
doesn't.
with Saleh. But
Yeah.
like if not, you end up with Staley, who was a horrible head coach at the Chargers. His defense was that the most laughable playoff game ever, where the Jaguars, speaking of them, ended up coming back and winning that game. And then his one good year was, 2020 with the Rams, which I think that's to to me, I look back at the 2020 year and I'm like, I think a lot of things were a lot different because without the fans and the pressure and injury luck and different teams moving stadiums, I don't know. To me,
It
it
was
would
a
be a
different year.
horrible look if the 49ers had such a bad year and then going into next year, this offseason when they should be showing that they've reflected, they've looked themselves in the mirror, they know their areas of weakness, their areas of strength, what things they need to improve. And instead, they just do musical chairs. They keep Nick
Yeah,
Sorensen and put him at special teamer, which, by the way, he was only a special teams coach 1 year. That was 2021, the Urban Meyer year. Once again, with the Jaguars, they're involved in everything. His special teams freaking sucked. It wasn't like it was great.
yeah.
It sucked.
They were ranked 24th in the league that year.
Yeah. Like what? So
But
why is he gonna why are they just gonna put him there for no reason?
well, they might not. Mike Silver tweeted yesterday that he doesn't think the Niners are going to hire Sorensen. And as
Mike Silver was the
we,
one that said Brandon Staley was good though. Oh my god, I got so mad.
well,
I saved that.
that's
I
that
was like, Mike Silver, what are you talking about? I
that's true, but
He's like,
hopefully
I bet the
Silver,
49ers will get Brandon Staley if they miss out on Robert Saleh. And then someone was like, that's insane. And he was like,
yeah,
he's good.
and that's a good thing. Yeah, yeah, it's okay. But hopefully he's right about this. And I think that he might be in that if I'm Sorensen, I want to do something that I'm good at. I would rather be a DB coach, but he has to wait for all the defensive coordinators to be hired first. So I think that's the delay is that Sorensen wants to get a DB job someplace else, but if he can't, then he'll fall back to being the special teams coordinator for the Niners. Meanwhile, the Niners have interviewed 3 different guys for special teams, so they're taking it seriously, at least on that position of who they're going to look at.
I was disappointed. I think was it the Colts? Just hired Fossil from the Cowboys.
Yeah,
And
best
I thought
special
that,
teams coach in the league.
yeah, I don't know. So stuff like that, I don't
Or
know. Even
Tennessee did. Tennessee hired him.
I pisses me off. Pisses me
Yeah.
off.
Oh, you talked about due diligence. There it is. It's
Yeah.
clearly the consensus best special teams coordinator in the league, the guy who was voted #1 by the NFLPA, the guy who Dallas' special teams top 5 every year, and they didn't even interview him. What is this?
Yeah. Didn't even interview him, Tom. That's insane. And like I was really hopeful that they would not only interview him, but like take a serious look at him because he's different from what they've had in the past two special teams coordinators. And like that's what people need to know. Yeah, Brian Schneider wasn't good, but the guy before also got fired. So this is a pattern under Kyle Shanahan, who clearly needs to, like, in the same way that he said, and who knows if he's actually, means it, but said that he was open to changing his defensive scheme. You need to be open to changing the way that you look at special teams, which we've heard him say that he doesn't really care about special teams, but they should be taking that seriously. And I know that they've done some interviews, but to me, to go and get someone who's more aggressive, who calls trick plays. The 49ers have called one or not called. They've done like one trick play ever, and it was the one
Yeah.
that Wisłowski just like ran on his own. Um, so
And it worked.
wasn't it successful too or something, but
Yeah.
people didn't know it was coming. Uh, I don't know. Yesterday was a bit of a bummer to me. Jeff Ulbrich got hired, Dennis Allen got hired, Fossil got hired, and it was just like 49ers are sitting there twiddling their thumbs. Now maybe their ass will be saved when it comes to defensive coordinator. I still think that they need to do something different at special teams. Their
Yeah.
fallback plan better not be Nick Sorensen. I don't think he's shown anything that should get him that job. And I right now, even with the good news about Saleh, I wish that they were interviewing defensive guys right now, just in case. You need to have a backup. You can't just, oh well, there was no one else available. We had to get Staley. That was their excuse last year for getting Sorensen. Sorensen wasn't good enough the year prior. And they fired Steve Wilkes at the end of the Super Bowl, so everyone was already hired up. And Kyle Shanahan basically just didn't he just admit to this at this year at the like closing
Year-end.
interview? He literally like tried to throw Sorensen some bail by basically saying like we knew he wasn't prepared. and he was our only option. And so it's like, why would you put yourself in a situation this year when you actually like have a head start because you're not in the playoffs? Why would you put yourself in the position to once again be picking last? I don't know. Now, maybe it'll be okay, but
We'll see how it shakes out. And Mr. Corey says hopefully they hired Notre Dame special teams coach. Yeah, he's very good. Marty Biaggi, he's the
that'd be
best
interesting.
special teams coach in NCAA football. But my guess would be that the other three guys that they interviewed, so that would be Jet Modkins, Banjo from Denver, and Tabor from Carolina. I think one of those three guys will end up being their coordinator.
Do you have a favorite between those three? Like one that
I,
you
I like Modkins. Detroit has consistently been a good special teams unit, so
I
he's the
agree.
assistant. But Tabor is the special teams coordinator from Carolina. They've had good years and bad years. 2022, they was very good. They were ranked fourth in the league. But 23, 2021, they weren't that good. So
Okay.
from consistency, I would want Jed Modkins from Detroit. And the question will be, is he going to get picked up by Ben Johnson or Aaron Glenn when they move on to a head coach job?
That's once again, like Niners, don't be sitting on your ass. Like
Yeah,
are do they I don't know if they're conducting second interviews or what. Offer him it now before he goes to Ben Johnson. That's
yeah, but they
anyway.
want to wait for Sorensen to tell them no, and Sorensen's going to wait because he wants to wait for his DB job.
Why
It's
are you
always
waiting on Thornton? What has he done in his career at all? Like, you just like
nothing,
him? He's just a guy in the
nothing.
building? Okay,
He's
keep
there.
him as a, assistant something. The stupid thing that they gave Brandon Staley. Like, did he ever
Yeah,
actually have a real title? Give him that. But don't wait. Don't lose a valuable position that you actually could use talent and could use someone out of the building. What they've been doing year after year, revenge tour after revenge tour, running it back, that clearly isn't working. Definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Go get a
well,
Detroit. I mean, the thing that I was just saying about Fossil, when you brought up he was in Detroit, that kind of makes me feel like that guy's probably a little bit more aggressive and open to trick plays because Detroit,
sure.
similarly how the Cowboys did that, Detroit does that all the time.
Yeah,
And I'm
well,
not saying
that's also
any
a reflection of Dan Campbell. He's more willing to be aggressive.
agree, but like I assume that maybe you have some similar like mindsets in order to like
Yeah,
work together. And like
yeah, you've got to
I
be
don't
like
I'm not
minded in
saying
that.
be Detroit and go for it on every single down. Matter of fact, I don't know, when I was looking at that Ravens game, the fact that they went for two and then at the very end they could have just kicked an extra point and been tied, but because they had gone for two earlier in the game, they were down. That was a heartbreaking game. Although I'm very happy for the Bills. I hate it. I hate it for I'm going on a tangent. But really quick, I hate like I it's hard for me not to feel like bad for people. Like Lamar, the stereotype going into playoffs is, Lamar chokes in the big games. He starts the game obviously on a bad note and you're like, "Oh no." But then I felt like he played really well for the rest of the game and then at the end he, leads a game-winning comeback and Mark Andrews ends up dropping it, and I'm not trying to
Yeah,
put it all on him because if the fumbles didn't happen earlier, that doesn't matter as much. But it's so hard for even with Jared Goff. I like felt sad. I was like texting my dad. Not like I'm not a Lions fan, but just like as a person, you're like, oh, like I want you to be able to go and prove them wrong,
yeah,
and
yeah.
you
You want to root
proved
for
up.
the
You're
underdog to
exactly.
succeed. Yeah,
You're exactly, especially with the Ravens, I do feel like even though they lost, it's just the AFC is so hard. The teams are
yeah,
so good. I think that most rational people will look at Lamar's performance. I know he had the turnover, but I think he actually played very well that game, like very well. And so I don't think he like reinforced that narrative as much, if that makes sense. Uh
yeah, yeah. It's just his performance in the second half showed what he can do,
yeah.
but
With Jared Goff,
his performance in the first half though showed what he has done. So
yeah.
it was kind of past first half and present second half. So it's a mixed bag for Lamar. He still needs to prove himself in the playoffs. He needs a win.
Yeah. Yeah. But how did we were talking about special teams coordinators. I was saying like getting the if the 49ers got the guy from Detroit, which from you telling me the guys that they have interviewed, that would be my number one option. Definitely above Nick Sorensen. Nick Sorensen is my fourth option. Like he's not even an option. Like if everyone
He
else that you
shouldn't
want
be.
to hire have already interviewed, like gets hired, go interview someone else. Like do not hire Nick Sorensen for that position. It shows neglect, like you're just neglecting your due diligence as an organization. You're like fault. It provides zero hope and optimism going forward to just play musical chairs with the same guys that you have in house and expect something to be different. Like that's so there should be major changes happening. Like or you're going to repeat that same season and then you're all going to be out of a job next year. So anyways, and you're going to waste people's, prime who are already like George Kittle's not going to be George Kittle for much longer. Fred Warner already went through an injury. Like this should be a year where you're going all in. Since they didn't fire the head coach, they kept the head coach. So to me, there should be a lot of pressure on this year, and it makes me, as you can tell, flustered that I feel like they're just gonna be like, oh, the same old shtick. It's like, well, that maybe you'll get in the playoffs because you have a really easy strength of schedule. Although who knows, you lost to bad teams this year too. But anyways, I the reason that I brought up the playoff games is because I was saying I hope that they get the guy in Detroit because I do want a little bit of a change in mindset, more open to being aggressive, more open to trick plays. But I think that the collaboration is key. So Kyle is really conservative, and if a different guy is like more aggressive, then they can meet in the middle. I don't think that you need to be Dan Campbell or Harbaugh who goes for it every single time. I just am saying, or trick play every single. I think the Jameson Williams throw. Maybe I know you at the time. Maybe they didn't trust Jared Goff, but don't get cute in that moment. Just try to protect the football, and maybe you win the game. So what I'm saying is I love the idea of bringing different people who have different mindsets and then coming to a compromise because to me you get the best out of everyone that way versus getting everyone who does the Shanahan system, Shanahan way. There's no diversity and you're not spicing things up, and at this point it feels like their system has been found out. And
Yeah.
maybe before they've relied on like, okay, everyone kind of knows what we're about and what we're going to do, but we have this one really special player. Well, right now, Debo's not going to come back and be Debo. You can talk about like hoping and praying just out of nowhere something happens. I don't think Debo's ever going to be his 2021 or even close to itself. Christian McCaffrey, even if he comes back and he's healthy, like he's 28 going on 29, had major knee surgery coming off of bilateral Achilles tendonitis. Like to me, you can't just rely on like singular player to come back and save you. You should structurally be looking at your team and making changes this offseason to set yourself up to be a better team going into 2025, not just hoping and praying.
Yeah, but you're expecting change from Kyle Shanahan, and to that I would say good luck. He doesn't do that. But what they should do is build up the plan B. That if plan A all along has been the revenge tour and banking on their pros and banking on the guys that have been here and done that, guys that have played really well. If they get to that point and say, okay, now we need to enter the draft and free agency to the point where we can withstand those injuries rather than those injuries taking us to 6-11. That's what this year needs to be about is how do we
Yeah.
build up the roster to the point that we can handle injury rather than be derailed by it. And that's where they're going to have to do well in the draft and free agency. And they did last year in the draft anyway. Free agency they didn't. So we'll have to see how they approach that this time. But they know the path that's before them. Getting Salah back, and it looks like that'll happen, is a big step forward for them in strategy and having an emotional leader the defense can feed off of, and someone that's great strategically that can handle the wide nine and pivot to other defensive schemes. All of those things are things they needed. So within Salah, he himself can be a change agent, even if Kyle isn't. So Salah can change things, and that'll be important and helpful. And the other aspect with Salah is that he can also identify what his defense will need given what kind of roster he's got. So hopefully he can come in and tell them free agency, we need to be looking at these guys, not those guys. And they can get better with their free agent signings.
They definitely need to address the trenches, that's for sure. But I like
Oh,
that
sure.
you like bringing in Saleh in some ways is like bringing in a second head coach because he
Yeah.
emotionally is going to have that element, but also he has the experience to make requests or demands for personnel that will probably influence both the draft and the free agency. So you're right on that, and that brings me some optimism. I like that. Maybe moving. We're kind of already doing this, but I was going to say, did you have any takeaways from the divisional round, which obviously we just watched?
Oh,
Uh,
lots of them.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Regarding to me, when I thought about the quarterbacks, and when I thought about the teams that won, it's so important to play and to be able to play in weather. Uh, Kurt Warner also went on a rant that I saw today trending on Twitter, where he really talked about how he played in Arizona, he played in uh LA, right? No, am I blanking?
St. Louis and
St. Louis, yes. But
and
he
for a bit
said
New York.
he was talking about, like, if he had to go play a playoff game in snow, that he felt like there was almost no way he could prepare for that, and it was really difficult for him, where if you're a snow team coming and playing in normal weather, it's a lot easier, and when you look at, I mean, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, they were really running the ball a lot. I don't know, it's super important for your quarterback to either A, have a really strong running element to his game so you can run him during the snow, or B, have a as big of an arm as Josh Allen where you can just throw in the snow and it doesn't even matter. Uh Scary when I think about Purdy and how he's really struggled just in rain.
Yeah.
When
So
playoff games
give
are gonna be in snow.
right. You look at the NFC and you say, okay, Green Bay outdoors, Chicago, and they're going to be a lot better next year outdoors. Washington, Philly, and so these are a lot of contenders where it's entirely possible you're going to play the NFC Championship in bad weather unless you're the one seed. So they have to do that. Plus, you have to build your team up to the point where they can be weather resistant. You would need a great offensive line, a great running back, so that you could just run in the snow and you don't have to worry about your quarterback. And it's look at what the Niners did in the NFC Championship in Green Bay. Jimmy G only threw what 8 passes, if that. And so as long as you have the running game to handle that, you're okay. And that's what a team needs to do. What Kurt Warner was talking about was basically the Goldilocks effect. That if you are playing in an area like Arizona, you aren't accustomed to playing in bad weather anywhere else, and you can't handle it. And so,
Yeah,
to me, as a head coach, I would go early to the road location and practice in the snow, the rain, whatever it is. I
that's
would
fine.
adjust. I would do something. But if I'm the GM, I would also make
Didn't they
sure
do that
that
a couple of
I
years
could
ago?
compete in all weather. And that's an issue that Shanahan is going to have to consider because Washington is now the rising star of the NFC. Philadelphia has a very solid team that should be around for a long time. They're going to be a snow team in January. You have to be ready to prepare to be able to play in the weather in rain or snow. And right now,
It's so
I'm
funny
not
that
sure they
Kyle
are. I mean, look what
it's
happened with McCaffrey. He got hurt in the snow in Buffalo,
yeah.
where he hurt his knee on a rock hard surface that's not heated underneath. Lambeau is heated underneath the field. The new stadium in Buffalo will have heat under the field. The current stadium in Buffalo doesn't. I don't know about Philly. I don't know if they heat or not, but you have to be prepared for that possibility.
Completely
Right now,
agree,
the
and, like,
Niners are not.
they're not, and Kyle thinks that the team is above that. I mean, when it comes to rain games, he's talked about how he thinks practicing with a wet football can psych his quarterback out, and there's no need to do it. And then we've seen how Brock Purdy has responded in rain games, and it's like, hey, maybe you should do what every other coach does in the NFL and get that football a little wet so your quarterback is used to trying to grip a football like that and trying to throw a football like that. Because you're right, same thing with in the same way that like they're not accustomed to playing on snow, You're not always accustomed to playing in the rain. Um, I wish that Kyle made, I think previously under Kyle, he's had such a dominant defense and such a dominant run game that there's been all these elements of football that he kind of blew by the wayside and never thought was important. Special teams, kicker, but same thing, rain games, weather, snow games. These are things, if the 49ers are going to want a shot to win critical playoff games come next year or even in the years following that, these things are going to be much more important the older the roster gets, the more expensive the roster gets, the less dominant just these two sides of the football are. That's when having a complete team is very important. By the way, having a complete team has always been important. These things have bitten them in the most important moments because
Yeah.
they've, maybe they were able to skate by all the way to the NFC Championship game or all the way to the Super Bowl. But then eventually, these small things, penalties, playing kind of in my opinion, more amateur football, not being strict when it comes to the rules. Like these little elements that they, got away with for the most part up until the very end, to me are even more critical now that you don't have the most dominant defense. You don't even have a top defense right now. You don't have the most dominant running game. Speaking of
Yeah.
that,
So
just to your
the details matter. You
yeah.
have to take a granular approach to coaching where you cover all of that. Steve-O says in the chat, no coaches practice with a wet ball. That's true. I don't know of any teams that do, but that still makes it incumbent
Uh,
on
Andy Reid.
Andy Reid. Okay,
Yep.
well that
Carson
that
Wentz went on with a thing and talked about how
okay
they practice.
that tracks.
So, I
That's
feel like if
Andy.
anything does it,
Okay,
that every
okay,
coach ever should do it.
okay. Well, that's Andy Reid being granular, and that's what you need is your head coach to be granular. But most of the teams, to Steve-O's point, nearly every team doesn't. And so my point in dealing with that, one of the things that Brock Purdy needs to work on this offseason is practicing with the wet ball. He has to
Okay, I
come
like
up
that. So,
with a wet ball solution. Do you need a glove? Do you not? Do you have to change your mechanics as a result of dealing with the rain? Figure out something so that you've got a comfort zone the next time you play in the rain. And you know that Kyle's not going to be willing to practice with a wet ball, so you're going to have to. It's one of the things Purdy's going to have to work on this offseason.
I like you pointing that out because obviously I want the head coach to be the head coach, but Purdy, if they're going to pay you, these things are on you now. You have to step up and be a leader. You have to step up and do every little thing. And if your coach isn't doing it for you, then you need to put those extra hours in. If there's
Yeah,
a game that's predicted, maybe it's going to rain, and you guys practice throughout the week and Kyle doesn't have a wet football, you better be staying after practice and doing that. Like, at some point you're no longer Mr. Irrelevant, the last pick in the draft, hunky dory, and it's on you to. I mean, think about the personal responsibility that Tom Brady had to become Tom Brady. Part of it was like how great Belichick was and the what he asked out of his players, but also Tom Brady intrinsically asked a lot out of himself and held himself to a
yeah,
strict routine. And we've heard that with Patrick Mahomes. We've heard that with Josh Allen. A lot of these quarterbacks have their own personal things that they do on top of what their coaches require, whether that's to help them get in rhythm with their running or with their wide receivers or just little things they need to work on. I remember this was now 2 years ago, but Josh Allen did like a little 15-minute documentary on how he spent multiple years in the offseason retraining himself how to throw using his hips because he was like a upper body thrower for the majority of his life. So yeah, if you're gonna
yeah.
49ers gonna pay you, Brock, personal responsibility from the quarterback is important. You can't always blame the coach. Obviously, we can say
Right.
it starts with the coach, but once you get paid that amount of money, if your coach isn't doing it, now it's on you. I
Yeah.
like that.
He has to take the accountability and responsibility. It's part of being a professional is just to say, what are the weaknesses in my game? How do I get rid of those? And so it's either deal with a wet ball or deal with a solution, be it a glove or what have you. But take a couple days, throw in rain, and figure it out. What's the
Absolutely.
solution? Is it mechanics? Is it a glove? Is it something else? But just come up with something. I'm not advocating that he has to practice with a wet ball for 3 months. I'm just saying that he needs to get to a point where he's comfortable with a new solution so that rain doesn't take his game out. Right now, it does.
Yeah.
Look at that. You had rain against the Rams, you scored 6 points. That's your takeaway, is that this cannot continue. Plus, in an NFC where Washington is ascending, Chicago is ascending now with Ben Johnson, Philadelphia is consistently in the mix in
Yeah.
the conference championship or at least in the divisional round. You're going to be playing outdoors. You're going to have a solution. Period.
Absolutely. I know Steve was talking about in baseball they don't throw in the rain or whatever, and that's potentially good information. But in football they do play in the rain, so you have to be prepared to
Yeah,
throw in the rain.
you need to have something. Mr. Corey asked, "Would I have taken Rosengarten over Ricky Pearsall?" No. Um, the guy that I wanted in the draft in the first round last year was Graham Barton. I'm an advocate of trading up, so I would have traded up for Barton to get your center. If Rosengarten was the guy they wanted in the second, all they had to do was trade up 2 picks. And it's
Tom and I both
again, it's
strongly
not like it
advocated
came
for
as
that this
yeah, and
offseason.
it's not as if it comes as a surprise that Baltimore took Rosengarten. Everybody and his brother knew they were going to do that, except the Niners, apparently. So yeah, that's what you do. Is that I would have traded up in the first for a lineman, preferably Graham Barton,
And
because he
traded
can
up.
play center guard tackle, and he would have been ideal at center. And then Rosengarten, all you have to do is go up a couple spots.
Yeah,
And then
it
they would have
wouldn't
been
have
done.
even been a
Not bad
difficult like, it was
if you
so
had Tony
frustrating.
and Rosengarten in the draft. Wow.
It was so frustrating to watch as a fan, that draft, because he was right there, and it would not have taken much to get him.
Yeah,
But yeah, and then especially you look at their careers now, uh, and Rosengard wouldn't have gone that high, but in hindsight, the 49ers would do that trade if they could. So then they could have Zach Frazier or even have drafted,
sure. And
Yeah.
Bo Limmer. I was talking
They
about Bo
made a
Limmer
lot
during
of
the draft. Yeah. A lot of us were saying Bo Limmer, Bo Limmer, Bo Limmer. And then they didn't pick him, and off he goes to the Rams and he starts in playoff games. Hello.
yeah. So they've their draft was one of their better drafts that they've recently had, which is saying something because even this draft could have been a lot better, but I'm trying to take my wins where I can get them. So I think if I was going to look at last
Okay.
offseason, I would call that a win, even though we can
It was.
definitely, I mean, even Steve-O says there's 3 of you guys that were picked. There's lots. If you go look at the draft, look at the 49ers picks, and then just look right around them, and you'll see guys that are making impactful plays in the playoffs right now. Uh, Deshaun Jackson, by the way, does anyone remember Mike Silver tweeting out that he was the guy? And then, so, but moving on from the draft, or
If
you
I
can ask,
could,
you
one
can ask
question because we get this a lot.
I was going to
Drew
say, you were
Dahlman.
literally asked about this last week. So,
Right. Here's my response, Mr. Corey. Kyle shops an offensive lineman at the dollar store. Everybody to the right of Trent, he won't spend the money. Dahlman is the most expensive center in free agency. There is no way on planet Earth Kyle Shanahan will spend the money in free agency on Drew Dahlman.
can I ask
Won't
a
happen.
question? Didn't they pay for Alex? Like, I remember with
They
Alex
paid for
Mack.
Mack. They paid for Weston Richburg, but those guys didn't make nearly the amount of money that say Dahlman will get this year in free agency. He's the top center in the market. He's going to get more than 10 million per. Kyle's not willing to pay that.
49ers need to make a move like that. Like,
Well,
they should be going out and getting the top center. Like, they're not. The rest of their team is gonna be the same team, just a little bit older.
draft draft the center. There's a lot of talented centers in the draft. Don't spend the
Okay.
money in free agency on that. I've got an article coming up later this week on free agency. The 49ers will have 30 to 35 million to spend on outside free agents. That's after taking care of everybody internally, including Purdy, Dre, Hufunga, whoever. They'll have 30 to 35 million. They can't spend 10 of that on Drew Dahlman and won't
Why?
because it costs too much. You know,
Okay.
what they need is a run stopping defensive tackle,
Definitely.
a run stopping edge, depth in the
Yeah,
secondary, depth at linebacker. Those are things they can do that are relatively inexpensive. The rumor is that they want to bring back DJ Reed, and that could give them the third starter at DB. I can see how that
If
makes
they
some
get
sense,
Saleh, they might do that.
but and then if you bring Salah back, it makes more sense. But I like the DBs in this draft. I especially like the guy from Florida State and Amos from Ole Miss. Those are the guys that I really love, but I don't think that the Niners are going to pick them. I think that it makes sense that they'll go after Reed, and because he's relatively older at 28, they can get him for less. So if your budget is 35 million, I can see why they're doing that. But a $35 million budget means there's no way that they're going to sign Drew Dalman. Just let go of that dream. Ain't gonna happen.
Maybe this ties into it then. I'll ask you it now. Deomnder Lenore, 2 days ago, 3 days ago, two, said that Max Crosby would look great in a
Oh,
49ers
sure it would.
uniform. He put it on Twitter. We talked about Max Crosby rumors, I think, at the trade deadline in the middle of this season. You had a pretty good reason why the Raiders in general don't want to do business with the 49ers. Do you think that them not no longer being in the Bay Area, they're in Vegas now, maybe that doesn't matter as much? Or do you think that,
I don't think so. No, we're talking about a Davis that owns the team. I think that blood runs really deep, and so he was not willing to deal Khalil Mack to the Niners when Mack was offered to the whole league. The Niners made the best offer. Mark Davis refused because it was the Niners. So any scenario that involves dealing with the Raiders, just toss it. He's not going to do it.
so you think no Max Crosby?
No, no way.
Max Crosby would be, is Max Crosby, in your opinion, is he better than Nick Bosa right now?
Yeah.
I think so. He has a really like someone I was listening to like a little quick video that was talking about all about how great Max Crosby was. I didn't realize he barely comes off the field. He'll play every defensive snap.
Oh, yeah.
Or like
Every
Nick Bosa's
down.
like in a rotation. Max Crosby's always there. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a couple of defensive ends that are better than Bosa. Crosby's one of them. Miles Garrett is another.
It
But
would be great,
the
like
Niners aren't in position to go get somebody that's really expensive and add to the
too
roster.
much money.
They don't have, yeah, they can't absorb that.
I know these Tom, you're making sense, but like these are the moves. I know that like it feels very, I guess, fan to be like, go get the best center, go get the best. But to me,
I
they're like
understand the thinking all the way. It's get the
when you
best
look at
guy.
Washington,
Yeah.
when you look at the teams in division, like they inspire more hope going forward because they're younger teams. They're teams that are, more players. The 49ers used to be a destination where players wanted to go. Like in free agency, players would rather go to the 49ers. Even going to California takes more money. But they had such a good, promising team. There was really hope that they could make a Super Bowl. The players would choose to go to the 49ers over other teams. Last free agency, we saw the 49ers, bargain bin shopping, losing out to players who chose Washington over them, who chose the Cowboys over them. It was hard as hell to sign players, and
Yeah.
it makes me worried when we think about where the 49ers are at. To me, the perception is kind of this is a make or break year, and a lot of like there's a lot of aging veterans, there's a lot of injury riddled veterans on this team, and in division, when you look at Washington, like they're they're there too early. They didn't expect to be where they are now. So many guys are going to want to go to a team like that because so
Well,
anyways, I want them to go.
let's take that point though. I think
Yeah.
it's the correct one. Washington is going to be a force, partially because they've had a lot of cap room. They did last year. This year they've got 73 million in effective cap room, so they've got a lot of money to spend, and that's going to be somebody where they can go after T. Higgins. If Cincinnati can't keep Higgins, he'll probably go to Washington. Who wouldn't want to play for
I saw
Jaden
someone saying
Daniels and
Rams.
play on a team? Yeah, but I don't think so because the Rams. Stafford wrote on Twitter this weekend that he's contemplating retirement. So if you're T. Higgins and you've got your choice of
Yeah,
same
you.
money and which team, I'm going to go play with Jaden Daniels. Period. And that's going to be a real concern for the NFC, is that Washington is now going to be a free agent magnet because of Daniels and because of their free agent money and because of their location. There's a lot of kids, the top players in high school from Baltimore to Miami is a real just treasure trove of high school talent. Those kids are going to be interested in going home, and they can go home if they go play for Washington. So, yeah, the cap room, Jaden Daniels, and location, Washington is going to get the best free agent. If anybody offers the same money, the free agent will take Washington. That's going to
I
be a
think
real
this is
problem for the Niners. They're going to have to outspend to get guys.
They're gonna have to outspend because not only are you in California, so you're not gonna keep as much of your money, but two, the defense didn't perform well, the offense didn't perform well. So like you're not excited to come to the 49ers because you think that they could make a run. Right now, it doesn't look like they're gonna make a run. Right now, it's like, are they gonna make the playoffs?
Yeah.
And that doesn't inspire like players want to go when they're going to teams and they're getting multiple offers, they look, okay, well, if all the money's the same, where's my best chance of winning a ring? Right now, I know 49er fans are like deluding themselves into thinking, oh, it's just 1 year. Other players are, they don't have that bias. So they're going to choose a team that actually looks like they have more youth, more toughness, more speed. Those are all things that the 49ers don't have, better trenches. And then this wasn't a topic, but I felt like Mr. Corey brings up something interesting. We saw last offseason, Brandon Ayuk really wanted to go to Washington. He put clips out of Washington. He went on a podcast and talked about Washington. Part of this was negotiation for his contract, whatever.
Well,
But
part of it also was he played with Jaden Daniels at Arizona
yeah,
State.
and so that's what I was gonna say. Like, but he did have a personal relationship with Daniels, and he knew how good he was. And now we're seeing, oh, it makes sense outside, like taking the financial element about out of it. It makes sense why Brandon Ayuk might have felt like going to Washington could be, a new lease on life. For first of all, not Kyle Shanahan and the doghouse and everything you have to deal with there. But second of all, an elite quarterback that can throw you the ball, that can make up for situations when the play caller doesn't have the right play. Do you think that Brock Purdy, because we're talking about paying Brock Purdy this year, and in division is gonna, or in the NFC is gonna be Daniels, who's gonna now they're gonna be the team with the rookie quarterback that has a ton more. Is Brock Purdy to me doesn't make up the difference to be making more money than Jaden Daniels, even the same amount of money. But I know that that's just how things go. Do you think that players would choose to come to San Francisco because of Brock? Because that might be like people
No,
say, "Oh, he's elite, he's not." Isn't that kind of an interesting way of looking at it? Like,
yeah,
if you're a
it's one
player.
way to answer it. Yeah, is that who's a free agent that would say, I want to go to San Francisco to play with Brock Purdy? I don't think you're going to get that. But
Yeah.
we saw with Ayuk, who would want to play with Jaden Daniels? Lots of people.
Like,
And
there's people who will
after
want to
these
go to
playoffs,
Washington.
even more. So that's going to happen. But we'll just have to see how it shakes out. Lessons from the divisional, I had a couple. So the first is a young quarterback with a great coach can go far, and so we saw that with Jaden Daniels, and now we've seen that with Chicago hiring Ben Johnson. They're thinking the same thing. We've got Caleb. We can compete now that we've got a great coach. Then you've got
It's gonna be
Minnesota.
interesting. It's interesting to me. I heard that that Tom Brady was like in calls, really trying to get Ben Johnson to go to
He
the
was
Raiders.
recruiting him hard. Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if like the Raiders is just a trash organization and it's hard to try to draft your guy, or I feel like Ben Johnson choosing Chicago means he does see something in Caleb.
Yeah, I think Caleb is why he chose Chicago, among other things, but that was
Yeah.
the primary one. And so you go through all the young quarterbacks. There's a youth movement in the NFC now because you've got Caleb with Ben Johnson. You've got Jaden Daniels in Washington. Minnesota just extended KOC today. They'll have JJ McCarthy as their quarterback next year. Another
Yeah.
young guy that hasn't even played yet.
Yeah.
You got Atlanta with Michael Penix. And then you've got the Niners with Brock Purdy. So the NFC is changing guard, and we'll see how that goes. But if you're measuring Purdy in terms of elite, if you're a player, who would you rather play with at quarterback? All those guys are Purdy, and the answer is all those guys. So
Yeah.
that's a
Which
factor.
to me should be why if you're the 49ers, you aren't so eager to just sign Brock Purdy right away. I know we've talked about this
Well,
already, but
yeah, they're trusting that in Kyle's system that they can develop players that will fit with what the system requires at quarterback and receiver, and they'll succeed. And they can look back and say, 2023, we made that happen. So that's going to be their thinking. I understand you're frustrated by that thinking.
look at
I agree
Washington.
with you, but it's their
Look at
thinking. It's Kyle Shanahan. It's what he's going to do. You can't
look
change
at
that.
Cliff. Look at Cliff in Washington. He's calling a lot of college style offensive plays, and I'm not saying it's all that, but I'm saying it frustrates me that with Kyle, he look at Jordan Mason, Juwan Jennings, tons of other guys, like, you'll see talent, a guy who is talented, and he will sit and waste valuable, cheap years on the bench because he hasn't perfected the Kyle Shanahan system. Where you
Yeah.
look at other teams, like if Jaden Daniels was on the Niners, would he be playing? Like he might not even play because what Washington did is they didn't say, we're going to wait till you're ready to play our system. They said, okay, we're going to figure out what situation do we need to put around you? What offense do we need to call that's going to make you the most comfortable? And even Andy Reid, I know that Patrick Mahomes sat his rookie year, but Andy Reid has talked about how he went back and tried to learn what Patrick Mahomes was doing in college and brought that in because these play callers see talent and they go, okay, we're going to use this. We're going to ease him into the NFL system. And we're not going to throw him in, to the wolves to either A, suck, or to B, waste his time on the bench. We want him on the field. We see that he has talent that could help us go far, but we just have to get creative and making him feel comfortable until he's fully integrated into the NFL. And other teams are able to do that where Shanahan is sitting there like my way or the highway. And to me, that's so frustrating,
Um,
especially when you look at
yeah.
the
Oh, when you
Washington.
look at everybody else, yeah, you look around the league and say, why aren't you adapting? Adapting is working for everybody but you. You're the one that refuses to adapt. Mr. Corey says we tried to join that club with Trey Lance. Yeah, and that points out to one of the key weaknesses for Kyle is that he's never been good
Relevant.
at this
Yeah.
evaluating talented quarterback. Kyle is not good at it, and
Yeah.
you look at all the choices he's made; they haven't been good ones.
Even
And it's
that, like,
just there's a lot of stuff in this organization that relates back to Kyle, and you just have to accept that that's the baggage that comes with having Kyle Shanahan as Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, OC coach and GM, and that's who this organization is for the foreseeable future. And now that Saleh is coming back, I would argue that that's probably going to mean that Kyle can keep coaching through his extension. So that would be through the 2027 season. But if they hadn't won a ring by then, I would hope that the Yorks would finally move on. But that's probably what it's going to take. Is that now that Saleh is likely to return, I think that's going to revitalize the Niners to an extent because they'll get some level of creativity and innovation from Saleh to help their D, and that will help them be more competitive and more complete.
I was interested. I know it's like kind of trigger warning to talk about Trey Lance, but it sucks to me that now because that move didn't work out, I feel like they'll no longer. We were just talking about in free agency being aggressive, that they won't be aggressive in that same way. Because when we look at the teams and the quarterbacks that are still alive today, in the playoffs, what they were hoping Trey Lance would be is kind of the prototype of what these players are. Now, obviously, they chose the wrong player, so the evaluation was wrong. And I'm not saying they should do that again, but like their analysis that the league was moving towards needing a quarterback that could have a running element, that needed to be tough and physical, that needed a strong arm. They wanted to, like, they had Jimmy G. They had the offense that was supposed to make the quarterback's life easier and kind of the team elevates the quarterback versus the quarterback elevating the team. They had that. And they
Yeah,
said, "Oh, actually this isn't enough. We've assessed our situation." They did the thing that to me they never do, but they actually did it in this situation. They assessed where they were at, and they made a choice to go in a major, different direction from where how their team was set up. And unfortunately, they just like didn't follow through with it. And also maybe Trey Lance just wasn't the right guy, but also I don't think they put him in a situation to prove that or not at the time. Um, but it makes me mad because I'm like, it actually feels like they did, finally for once self-assess, compare themselves to the rest of the league, see where the league was going. We're talking about bad weather games. We're talking about what sets these quarterbacks that are still alive today apart from the rest, and it's strong arms. It's they can run. I mean, Jaden Daniels throwing the ball was beautiful, but every drive, I feel like he had at least one run for like 7 yards
Yeah,
or something. Like he was
yeah,
keeping them alive by having that element. And I'm not talking about just like called quarterback runs where he was supposed to run, but like if there was pressure, he could make something happen. And he was going like downhill with it. Where Brock Purdy can do that when he's working at his best sometimes, but a lot of times he's running out to the side and then finding someone downfield, which is good. But Jaden Daniels was really decisive, at least this last game that I watched,
yeah.
where no one's open. Okay, I'm gonna go get 10 yards. I'm not gonna wait, and then end up taking a sack. So anyways,
His
uh
decision making was elite. That
yeah.
he would commit to something and commit to it immediately based on what he saw. And part of the key with Daniels is he sees the game slowly. Yeah, the game unfolds slowly around him because he knows it so well. And
Yeah.
players that can slow the game down in their mind in any sport have a lot of effectiveness, do really well. And I expect that he's going to be very successful. So we'll see. It's just what the Niners did with Trey Lance was they identified that they needed a physical component, but I think that the reason they did it was Kyle was really angry with Jimmy for missing the open deep ball in the Super Bowl. Yeah. Trey Lance was a reaction to Jimmy's failure as opposed to Kyle assessing the whole league and
That's
saying,
that's
we
interesting. Like
need
maybe
we
was
need
the
this
right.
athletic run pass guy. No, no, it's we need to move on from Jimmy now. And so they
Yeah.
did. What they should have done was say, okay, we're going to package those picks and get a veteran that we know is going to be great. That's what they should have
Instead,
done.
they were wasting time just thinking that they were going to land freaking Matthew Stafford once again with them, circling back to the very beginning of this show with them not interviewing defensive coordinators and just being like, "Oh, hopefully it works out with Robert Saleh." It's the same. Literally their process has not changed, and that's what
Nope,
frustrates me with this organization, and that's
it's
why
not
I'm
going
not
to.
filled with inspiration or hope that they're going to change, be better in the future because literally the failure that they had with Matthew Stafford was just sitting and waiting and hoping it would work out instead of being proactive. Sean
Yeah,
McVay was
well,
proactive and he got to sign Matthew Stafford ahead of time. And
right.
yeah,
Well, Kyle was in Cabo a week too late. McVay was already there, and he signed Stafford. Boom, done.
yeah,
And the only reason the Niners ended up with McCaffrey, I would argue, is because McVay was also interested in him. And Kyle knew that if they got Stafford and McCaffrey, the division was done. So the Niners went all out to get McCaffrey because they didn't want the Rams to get him. That wasn't about identifying Christian so much as saying, we can't win the division if they get this guy. And so that was their motivation. Is we wanted to say all these things about, well, Kyle self-assessed and he finally understood. No, no. Kyle is always Kyle. He's
yeah,
he's always going to do this. Emmanuel Silvera says some great things in the chat about how they're being very safe and predictable on Sala. They are. It is Kyle trying to save his job. I agree with that. Yeah. I've written before about the guy that I would be interested in is Chris Hewitt. He's the assistant head coach in Baltimore. He's their passing game coordinator on defense. He's developed all pros, pro bowlers. He's worked in a defense that Mike McDonald and now in Seattle developed and killed the Niners with, whereas all that blitzing, all that disguised coverage work, all of that stuff, he's well versed in what kills the Niners. I would hire Hewitt as a great young mind that can take over and someone that can develop the secondary when you've got great secondary talent like the Niners now have, where you've got Renardo Green and Malik Mustafa and Demo. If you can take those guys to all pro, that takes your defense to a whole nother level. And we
yeah. It's
saw
kind of
that with
interesting.
Wilkes in the development of the DBs then. We
Yeah,
look at what Jair was under Wilkes and what he was under Sorensen. It's night and day. And
Yeah.
so with you, I would hire Hewitt, but I'm not the GM. Nobody cares what I think. So
I
yeah, if they're
care,
going
and
to
that's
hire Saleh, it's still going to work.
yeah.
It's still going to help. It's still going to be a good thing. Is it Kyle being safe? Yeah, but all of these things are Kyle being safe. Now, considering Sorensen as your special teams coordinator is safe. Saleh and no plan B except for Staley is safe. All of this is Kyle operating in his comfort zone. He wants to be comfortable in his role as Father, Son, and Holy Ghost with people he trusts and knows, as opposed to bringing in somebody new.
Completely agree. That's why I said I wish the 49ers were at least doing their due diligence, because you're right. They've spent a lot of their draft, at least draft value, and their best players right now on defense are in the secondary, which is a, division from what they were doing when they had Robert Saleh. So
Yep.
the one good thing is it becomes, it's like, okay, well, maybe these defensive trenches will look better. But then two, what does that mean for the secondary where you put a lot of your effort, and that's kind of been the shining element of the defense in recent years. We don't want that to regress, will it, if you're not utilizing someone who specializes in that? So
We'll see how the
I
defense
completely
does.
agree.
I think that Saleh is still a net benefit. And consider that you had Nick Sorensen and now you're getting Robert Saleh. You're definitely upgrading.
Yeah, and Sean Matt says they're being safe because of the last 2 years. I would say that the last 2 years they've been unbelievably safe. They've hired in-house candidate. Like
Yeah.
what they did last year was, I mean, it was stupid it was not safe to fire Steve Wilkes, who had a top 5 defense. Like that was idiotic, but that was them bowing down to the players, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, but hiring Wilkes, they will view, to Sean's point, I would guess, is that they hired the outside defensive coordinator in Wilkes and it didn't work. And so from
But it
their
did
thing,
work. Your players
how
just didn't want, like
I know the
Nick
players just
Bosa
didn't
didn't
want it.
like it. Like Bosa, you're not as good as you used to be. Shut up and like play better.
Yeah,
Sorry.
but
Jair
again, this
Brown would say that Steve Wilkes worked. Freaking Charvarius
yeah,
Ward would say Steve Wilkes worked. That secondary would say Steve Wilkes worked. The stats would say Steve Wilkes worked. So I'm not trying to say that he was the best, but I'm saying that Nick Sorensen definitely wasn't any better, and they didn't, in my opinion,
okay.
plan in a smart way.
Steve-O, why does every content creator think they're smarter than the team? Okay. If I was running the draft, instead of Mike McGlinchey, they have the safety with the Chargers. Instead of Javon Kinlaw, they have Tristan Wirfs. So, instead of TDP, they have Kirby Joseph, who's now an All-Pro. I'm not hired by anybody. Would you rather have those guys or who the Niners picked?
Yeah.
I get this argument. I get it. Well, you
Begging for the offensive line.
Look. Would you
For
rather
a
have
tackle.
Derwin James? Would you rather have Derwin James, Tristan Wirfs, and Kirby Joseph, or behind door number 2, Mike McGlinchey, Javon Kinlaw, and TDP?
Yeah.
Enough.
And Steve-O kind of follows through and says just in general, not I think
Okay.
saying like not
Okay.
I don't think I think most people are just stating their opinion, and there's been some pretty obvious weaknesses to Kyle Shanahan's team. For example, he's never invested in the offensive line highly. He's never thought he's always been pretty open that aside from Trent, that's their cap savings space. And I think that fans look at that and look at how he's suffered from multiple quarterback injuries that has ended seasons. I think that fans are just putting their opinions out. I don't necessarily think
Yeah.
people are saying we're smarter than the 49ers, but also, John Lynch came from media. So his background is not, and obviously he was a player. I'm not, saying he's a bad,
Yeah.
like he's very qualified, but I think fans are just content creators are putting out their opinions. When you look at their draft history, I think it's pretty fair to critique. When you look at the fact that now Adam Peters, what he went and did with Washington, I think it's fair to critique what the 49ers have been doing. And for people like Tom and others who have made more accurate, who have accurately identified the weaknesses on the team, who have identified players that they think would be good coming into the NFL or are already good, whether that's free agency or the draft. And then you see the 49ers year after year after year not going after those players, not drafting those players. I think that that's why
Yeah,
fans
that's
get
part of it.
frustrated.
And Steve-O, just to be clear, I was pounding the table for all those guys before the pick. Yeah, so none of this is hindsight. All those guys were guys that I wanted. Um,
Yeah.
you know, I was clear on
Earlier in this stream, people
Graham
were talking
Barton
about
last year,
Rosengarten.
right? And Rosengarten,
Earlier in
same
this
thing.
stream, people
So
were
yeah,
being like, "Oh, Rosengarten is good." You and I called that before the draft.
right, right. But regardless,
That's
I
not
think that what all
hindsight.
this
We thought that
points to is
before.
that yeah, I think what all this points to is, I don't think I should be the GM, obviously, but what I do think is based on the history, Kyle shouldn't either. That what this team needs is an outside GM. And I think Kyle's record in free agency and the draft would indicate after the Lance draft, after not being able to evaluate a quarterback, after the failed drafts in 22 and 23, after doubling down on veterans that are old and fragile and then being surprised they were hurt. All of that points to you need a GM that's better than Kyle.
Yeah,
This
I
team
completely
has to improve there. I think that's the biggest mismatch the Niners face in the NFC is the other team's general managers versus Kyle Shanahan. You've
yeah.
got
Look at the
Philadelphia
Eagles draft.
with Howie Roseman versus Kyle is Godzilla versus Bambi.
Yeah,
Brad,
the
you know,
Eagles draft have been phenomenal.
Brad,
Look at
Brad
the
Holmes in
49ers
Detroit,
went and
same
got
thing.
Hargrave. Look at what he did. Where the Eagles went and got Jalen Carter. That's why they're still playing right now. Is because he's on
Right,
their team.
right.
And by the
So
way, he's on their team. I know that a lot of people passed him up because he had personality and different issues, but that's also when it comes to culture. And a lot of people say, "Oh, Nick Sirianni, a clown, whatever." Whatever they're doing at the Eagles, where they've established kind of like a no nonsense. They're not making amateur penalties. They're like very they take football very seriously. They don't think of themselves too highly. They work hard and they come out and they play tough physical football every single week. And I think Jalen Carter would only have success in an organization like that. If he were to come here where no one ever takes accountability, everyone else is wrong, maybe he would have, continued to be a head case. And I'm not saying he's still not a head case, but he's playing very well because they not only were they able to like evaluate his talent, but also they have a team of players around him and that other players are coming into that inspire other players to play better and to be better professionals. And the
yeah,
49ers, in my
culture
opinion,
matters.
yeah,
And that's part of where Saleh can also help is that he can improve the culture that currently exists.
yeah,
It needs a refresh. And I hope that Saleh can provide that.
I
And
completely
hopefully
agree.
beyond the defense that he can spread that to the whole team.
And I
But
do think,
if you want to contrast, sorry, just one last thing. If you want to contrast between coaches, look at what Dan Campbell said after his loss. It's my fault. It's my fault. It's my fault.
yeah,
He said,
yeah,
"It's my fault." In 5 seconds, he took more accountability than Kyle Shanahan has in 8 years. Think of
yeah.
it.
I like Mr. Corey said the Eagles also didn't pass on Vic Fangio either because they weren't glued to their silly system.
Right.
Like I totally understand what Steve-O, was saying, but I feel like there's been a lot of obvious flaws. And I will say maybe it's less we think that we're smarter than, the entire front office as a whole, but it's more that we have identified that Kyle trying to do the job of 20 different people is going to doom this franchise.
Yeah.
He needs to allegate. He needs to have a real GM. He should have an assistant coordinator that helps him. So that's
Yeah.
those are my
Well,
takeaways. But really quickly before we
yeah.
end it,
Campbell, same result. I agree, Steve-O. But I think that culturally, Detroit's in a better place culturally than the Niners are.
yeah,
And that's as a function of Campbell being willing to take accountability. But I agree. You could look at the results and say, look, Dan Campbell lost the NFC Championship game last year, and he was probably the primary reason they lost. So yeah, you can't hold up Dan Campbell and put him on a pedestal. But the accountability aspect of his leadership, I think, is a positive, and I hope that that's something that Salah will bring to the team.
I agree. I think that, I mean, when I was just talking about the Eagles, I differentiated the difference between a team and a team with a culture and what positives that can bring you. Also, when we talk about Washington, like we talk about, you can take more chances on players if you have a better culture. You more players want to come to your team if you have a better culture. Like George Kittle was and Nick Bosa separately were asked about Dan Campbell, and they were like, his players want to run through a wall for him. It seems fun to play there. Like that's going to affect next year too. When it
Oh,
comes
sure.
to where the
Yeah,
49ers
it's a
are at.
long-term thing. It's
Yeah.
not just a snapshot in time, it's eternity.
Yeah.
Chris, yeah, last place schedule, but now that Ben Johnson is in
I was
Chicago,
gonna say Bears.
that's a danger.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. And also, don't forget, they literally got their ass handed to them by Miami, who was not a good team this year. So,
Beyond this, I would say that yeah, you can talk about the schedule, but the real issue is what do the Niners do within the division? That determines if they go to the playoffs and how successful
Tom, come
they
back.
are.
Tom, come back. It
Am
got
I
a little
here?
late. That's why.
Yeah. Oh, well,
Hi,
sorry
Tom.
about that.
No worries.
Hello.
Um, really
Okay,
quickly
Ashley.
before
Sorry
we,
about that.
but really quickly before we end it off, I want to know two things because we'll stream next week. Do you think by next week, maybe next week's too soon. Do you think next week the 49ers will have a defensive coordinator? And will that
Yeah,
be Robert Saleh?
yeah, and I do think it'll be solid. I think that Jacksonville will hire their head coach, and presumably it's Liam Cohen this week. And then
Okay.
Dallas and the Raiders still have decisions to make, but I think they'll move on them next week. Um, for some reason, Pete Carroll is the favorite to land the job for the Raiders. Good luck. And for Dallas, I think they're waiting for Cliff Kingsbury.
I completely agree. Um, and then really quickly, also just for fun, who do you think will win the games this weekend?
Uh, um, I think Buffalo is playing better football than Kansas City. I think they can win that game. And sorry about that.
No worries.
So my ISP is starting to fade. It always does at this time. So I'll make it quick. I think that Buffalo's playing better than Kansas City. That Kansas City has shown that they can't necessarily stop Josh Allen. They got 30 points regular season against them. So I think Buffalo can win that game. Unfortunately, I think that Philadelphia beats Washington because a team that can run and stop the run usually wins the playoff games. But Washington has the better quarterback, so that makes it a good game. But ultimately, I think the Philadelphia offensive line wins that game.
Tom, we are in agreement. I also am choosing the Eagles, which I don't. I want the Commanders to win. I don't like the Eagles.
Me too. Me
Um,
too.
but I assume weather game, run, being able to run, being able to stop the run, having I just think that it's also like Washington is just, so ahead of schedule. Like it's not, if they win now, like they're still they've this season has been a total success and they're only going to get better and be more improved going into 2025. Um
Yeah.
and then I really hope the Bills win. I'm nervous about, I know it's so taboo to talk about the refs. I hope that there's no like outrageous calls. I hope it's a really great game. And
Yeah,
in
just
previous
a well
matchups,
refed game.
yeah. And in previous matchups, they've had really great games. So I think no matter what, it'll be a great game. I hope that it's the Bills' year. I think that that's just, I think it's a little bit more interesting, more fun for them. And also, the Bills can put up points. Like sometimes their defense will let up points, but they can score. Kansas City has been lower scoring this year, so
Yeah.
I'm going with optimism, and I'm going to choose the Bills for that. And I think that whoever wins the AFC wins the Super Bowl, but that's getting ahead of myself.
We'll see. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyways, Tom, I had a great time chatting with you.
Me too,
Um,
Ashley. It was fun.
you talked about draft choices, free agency choices, what the 49ers are doing at defensive, coordinator, players to look out for, all sorts of things in your most recent articles. And I know that you're also working on another one. So everyone, make sure to follow Tom on Twitter. It's NinerCast. His articles are always put out there, and they've been on fire this week. If you want names to
Thanks,
look
Ashley.
out for, definitely when it comes to like draft stuff as well. Make sure to
Yeah.
go follow
Free
Tom.
agent free agency in the draft this week and over the next couple of weeks, really.
Yeah. And I'll dive more into that too, so we can have better discussions on that as those two things come racing towards us, which is exciting because never a dull moment. And then make sure to like and subscribe to my channel. If if Liam Cohen is announced, if he gets offered the job tomorrow and takes it, I'll go live right after that, depending on, and also, keep you updated what happens with Saleh, because I mean, the hope is that means Saleh comes here, but maybe he still doesn't. All that stuff is going to be very interesting. So make sure to give me a like and subscribe. I go live most days a week, so I really appreciate it. And yeah, Tom and I will join you to next week. So have a great Tuesday. Be safe, everyone. Bye.